Welcome everyone this morning to this special event on embracing the new paradigm of green development, and it's the launch event of the China Carbon Neutrality Policy Framework Research Report, which is published today jointly by the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and Environment at the London School of Economics and the China Center for International Economic Exchange, and the report is being published in both English and Chinese. We have the authors, many of the authors here this morning to launch the report and to discuss and answer questions from the audience. I'm going to start very quickly with some housekeeping. Interpretation is available. You look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a button that allows you to select the language that you would like to hear. So if you go down to that, you should be able to select Chinese or English so that you get a feed in whatever language you want. We will be having questions from the audience in the final session. And what you need to do if you want to have a question asked to the panel is to put it in the Q&A. So there's a Q&A function at the bottom. Type in your question there and I will read it out to the panel when we come to that session. What will happen when the individual speakers are speaking is you should only see them and hear them. Everybody else will turn their cameras off and will mute themselves. And we are due to finish at 10 a.m. UK time. I'm going to try and stick to that schedule and encourage our speakers to stick to their allotted slots as well. So we'll start by asking for some introductory remarks and scene setting by Nicholas Stern, who is chair of the Grantham Research Institute and one of the lead authors on this report. And if the other speakers can now turn off their cameras and mute themselves, Nick, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Bob. We're delighted to launch today. This has been a collaborative piece of work with scholars inside China, scholars outside China. I wanted to express my thanks to my friend of over many years and colleague, Zhu Min, for taking the initiative to launch or to initiate this whole story, this piece of work. These issues, of course, being discussed over a long period of time, but the purpose of this work was to set out how the transition to the carbon neutral economy could take place. What practically from the economics and society point of view would be involved in achieving that goal. So let me indicate some of the co-authors. I can't do it all, but I would want to mention our colleague at Columbia University, Joe Stiglitz, and Cameron Hepburn from Oxford, who will be joining us very soon. And again, Chunping Xie and Alex Clark, Chunping from Grantham, Alex Clark from Oxford, all of whom have been part of the team working outside China. I will leave to Zhu Min to acknowledge the excellent team that's been working inside China, and we've been working very closely together in a very cheerful and productive way. So that's how we began, and roughly speaking, who we are. What first is the point of going to net zero? We cannot dwell on that in this discussion, but let me just remind, the world is experiencing quite severe climate change already. The world's temperature has increased 1.1 degree roughly in terms of average surface temperature relative to the second half of the 19th century. We are probably headed well over 2 degrees centigrade.
Recording in progress.
Even if people stick with the targets that they have set at the international gatherings associated with the COP21 in Paris and COP26 in Glasgow. We have to deliver on the commitments, and we have to do still better than those commitments if we're to get temperatures down or hold temperatures to 1.5 or well below 2 degrees. Let's remind ourselves too of just how dangerous to go above 2 degrees, and indeed to go above 1.5 degrees would be. Already we see real dangers of big parts of China, northeast China, experiencing wet bulb temperatures of 35 degrees centigrade. That means temperatures and humidity taken together of a kind and extremity in which human beings could not survive outside. So that is the kind of risk that we run. We're already seeing the impacts last summer in China of droughts, and we risk, of course, the melting of the snow and ice on the Himalayas, on which so much water depends in China. That's the background in terms of the climate science. We won't be developing it any further here, but to remind of the extreme dangers that we face as a world if we do not act. And we remind ourselves also that China's success in building its very strong and big economy means that China's future in emissions is a very large part of the world's future of emissions. So that's why it matters so much. Then we go on to the next step in the argument, which is the main substance of the report. We recognize that this new way of doing things, this taking out of greenhouse gas emissions from the whole economy, is an enormous growth opportunity. But it's an opportunity that requires change right across the economy, and it involves investment and innovation, and it involves managing dislocation. So this is a very attractive new growth story. Cities where you can move and breathe, ecosystems which are robust and fruitful, much more productive and efficient use of resources, a much more healthy society, a society which is exploiting tremendous innovation in all these areas. This is a real growth story. This is investment in the new economy, the economy which is much lower cost, much more efficient, much greener, much healthier. This is the growth story, but we have to act strongly, particularly around economic and social policy, to make this happen. And making that happen is the key part of the report. But recognition that this is a big growth story is extremely important. This is not some kind of horse race between environment on the one hand and economic growth on the other. We recognize very clearly that unless we put them both together, we will not succeed on either the growth or the environment, that this is the growth story of the 21st century. But we have to do a lot to make it happen. We have to have the innovation, the investment, the management of the dislocation, and we have to have the economic and social policies and institutional structures that can make that happen. And we try to set out all that in the report. We hope that the report will be useful over the coming years and indeed over the coming decades. We hope that the report will be useful in shaping the ideas in the 15th five-year plan, which will in turn shape China's economy over the second half of this decade. So we hope that the ideas we put here will indeed be useful for action in China. Now, what is it that we have to do? Well, the first thing is to recognize this growth story and to make it very clear that the strategy of China's government, that's the strategy for China itself, is this new path. With that confidence, investors will look forward and they'll have the confidence to make the change and make the investments that are necessary. So the first thing is clarity and credibility about the strategy. And of course, in China, embodying strategies in the five-year plan is a very clear and strong way of showing the intention of the direction and showing the commitment to that direction. So that's the first part of the story. The second is to have an understanding of the metrics now in this new world that are going to have to be taken to guide the paradigm. Of course, measuring wherever we can carbon emissions will be important, a crucial part of the story. So metrics will be of real importance here. The policies themselves will be discussed as we go through. Market policies associated with carbon pricing, and of course Regulatory structures will be very important, and so too will be the shaping of finance and how the whole financial system works. That will be all part of policy. Institutional structures will matter enormously as well. In a change of this magnitude, which affects the whole economy, coordination across sectors will be very important. If we're expanding electric vehicles, then how they interrelate with the electricity generation, of course, is extremely important. And what has to happen first, what has to happen together. That kind of coordination will be very important, so too the way in which cities are organized and use energy. So institutions have a major role in coordination across sectors. The institutions will be very important in giving credibility, and institutions will be very important in managing a very big economy like China, with regions and cities and so on, which interact in complex ways. So institutions are going to be a very important part of that story. And finally, of course, there's technology itself. How the technology moves is crucial. We've seen extraordinary change in technology in which China has been a very big leader in driving costs down, in finding new ways of doing things. International cooperation around technology, international cooperation around finance will be very important. This report is mostly about China, but of course, the relationships between China and the world, the developing world and the rich world, will be a very important part of how the world goes forward. We think that China's example will be of critical importance. China's technology will be of critical importance, and China's finance will be of critical importance for the world as a whole, and the way in which, of course, trade operates as well. And we do touch on that in the report at the end. So let me thank Zhu Min again for his initiative. Let me thank our great friend Zhou Ji and Energy Foundation China for all their support and participation. And let me hand now back to my very good friend Zhu Min to begin the setting out of the report itself. Thank you very much. Report itself. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Nick. You even saved the 3 seconds. This is incredible. Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to join this launch event. And first of all, I would like to thank Nick and particularly and join with me to together do this fantastic research project. And also we have also some of also here cameras here. Thank you, and Chen Ping and also Daoju as well. They also hi, good to see you. Also a few other Chinese also as a team members not here. They are Liu Sijing, my good friends, and Zhang Yongsheng and Li Junfeng. So we are a great team and work very well. It's a very nice working process. Particularly for me, I learned great deal. And particularly, I would like to thank Nick, with all your rich experience and your wisdom you shared with us. And also, I would like to thank Zhou Ji for the support from Energy Foundation. I think this is also important to facilitate this process. This is very important. I hope we are happy for our report. And Zhou Ji is here. Looking forward to hear your comments. Nick set the tone, set the base in a clear way. In my time, I would like to make 3 points, only 3. I still have 9 minutes left. The first issue is carbon neutrality is a paradigm shift for China. The second is we need both government and market work together and also have to perform well. And number 3, the challenge is daunting, but the opportunity is even bigger. So first issue, the paradigm after months and months of studies will gradually reach agreements. The carbon neutrality is a paradigm shift for China. It is not only energy transformation. It's not only technology change. It's not only production function change. It's more broad sense, revolutionary change, shifting, involving production function change, consumer consumption function change, utility function change, social value change, and more broadly, an organizational structure change, urban structure change, and the relationship between the human and the nature, obviously, is a fundamental part. So it is a paradigm shift. It's just really, at the end of the day, as Jill Stiglitz mentioned so many times, we need moving away from GDP targeted growth to a more well-being targeted growth. I think this is very important. What does that mean for policy? That means we should not only emphasize on the energy transitions, we should not only emphasize on the heavy coal or carbon industries, more broadly have an overall view for changing the whole economy and the whole society. I think this is the most important thing. So fundamentally for China, we need to put carbon neutrality as a strategy for all the sector, all the economy, from very top strategy, as Nick mentioned, it's got to be clear, but also in all the other sectors, from industries, for financials, for fiscal policy, for local authorities, we need to nail down the carbon neutrality in every part of a macro policy framework, in every part of economic sectors, in every economic agent behave and their target. So this is very important. In that sense, we propose, currently China have a 1+N strategy, but we need in 1+N strategies to make sure nail down to all the province, all the sectors, all the households, and make sure things will change. The second important point is we study debating for quite long. We need both the government and the market work together and work well. By definition, carbon neutrality is a new public goods provided by the government, based on the climate change, which is a failure for both the government and the market. So how can government and the market do things right this time? It's a huge challenge. We don't have that experience yet. At least it's not all clear yet. Clearly, government should provide guidance, provide strategies with the clarities, provide infrastructure, provide incentives. I think those are the most important things. But market should play the fundamental role to locate the resource. I think those are the absolutely most important thing. So set the target right, provide an incentive scheme is the most important thing. And the market will locate the resource and get the price right. It's really the fundamental issues. There are various ways, from carbon tax to the ETS to the company's internal schedule pricing issues. So many ways, but we got to get the price right. We got to build a statistics system, to build a carbon accounting system across all the countries, across company sectors, even household in due course. When you have the whole accounting system, carbon accounts set up to this infrastructure, you will be able to measure, you will be able to see the progress. I think those are the role government should do, but the market should basically, within the framework, play the most important role of locating the resource. I think this is the most important issue. I see the market actually function very actively in China, particularly private sectors. So if you're looking for, some sector like solar energies and windmill energy, all those things. I think this is the case in both authorities, government policy, and the market incentives to bring them together. They can work, produce the results we expected and we wanted. But we need a more broad sense gradually, and withdrawing the coal and getting the renewable energy in, getting more green technology in. So this is really important issues. The government and the market should work together, and the market should play the key fundamental role in the sense of a resource allocation and making the market-based decision. The third point is the challenges are daunting for China because at a few things, China still have a middle income countries roughly have per capita GDP $12,000, so still moving away. So that means China still have quite a big chunk of industries, not a service. Service only account for 54% of GDP. Not in the US and the Europe, service account 6 to 8%. So the industry is heavier. The number two, China moving from 12,000 per capita dollar to the high income. So growth will be strong and moderate, at least 4, 5, 6% in the foreseeable futures. With strong growth, China will consume more and energy, which got to be the clean energy. And also China is such a big countries across different countries, across different sectors. So different technology, different energy consumption, efficiency levels, and a different income level as well. So that those things in such a short time, in 10 years, reach the peak, another 30 years, reduced to carbon neutrality is a huge challenge. All right. So China will have will experience the biggest economy transformation in terms of green and also with the faster speed, which is not easy, which is really not easy. But we also see this is a huge opportunities and also responsibilities for China. On one side, this is China's fulfill its responsibility for the international community. If China don't commit to carbon neutrality, I don't think the whole world will be able to reach that goal, right? So China have to do it. The second issue is domestically, the China current growth model will not be able to sustainable move into the future because we consume too much energy, too much raw materials, we pollute too much, not only air, but the water, the soil, the others. We spend billions and billions of dollars every year trying to clean the air, clean the soil and the waters. And now we have to change the production function, change the whole thing. So this carbon neutrality gives China a new window opportunity to really fundamentally change the Chinese economy, moving from a heavy, coal, carbon-based industry to a green, digital, and more modern economic structure as well. And that's also give China a chance to catch up with the global levels and also provide more experience, as Nick mentioned, for the emerging market, low-income country as well. So challenge is huge, but opportunity is even bigger. So as Nick said many, many times, this is a very exciting growth story. So that's also the reason China is seriously committed. I think we will be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Zhu Min, and to Professor Nick Stern for setting the scene and for outlining the main study findings. Before we move on to our next speaker, I just want to say some of the audience have had trouble logging in. So just to make clear that this is the launch event of the China Carbon Neutrality Policy Framework Research Report. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can select translation. And I encourage any member of the audience to submit a question through the Q&A button at the bottom. We're now moving on to a couple of other co-authors of this report, starting with Professor Cameron Hepburn of the University of Oxford. Cameron, over to you.
Thanks very much, Bob, and thank you, Nick and Jimin, for some really excellent remarks there. I will just add to them, and I hope you down the line will excuse my voice for a little bit of a cold. But we at Oxford, the team here, have been delighted to be part of this collaboration. I think it's no exaggeration to say that we are actually at a key turning point in the future of human civilization. That's a pretty big claim, but it's true. And China is absolutely at the center of this turning point. Whether we get this right or wrong for humanity as a whole, in large measure, depends upon whether China also succeeds. And I say we're at this turning point because it's now very obvious that the old models, economic models that have been very valuable, that have increased our prosperity around the world for a couple hundred years, they no longer work. They're failing. They're undermining our life support systems on the planet. We're seeing growth rates falling. We're seeing increased inequality and social dislocation. So we know we are at a juncture where something major has to change. And the necessity of tackling climate change creates, as Nick and Jimin have said, this huge opportunity to develop a paradigm shifting new model of growth and prosperity that's actually fit for the world in which we find ourselves. And as Jimin put so fundamentally, so beautifully, this isn't just about changing the production function, or even quite deeply about changing the utility function. And nor is it just about refocusing our growth away from output and on well-being. It is all of those things, and they're all very deep. And it's more. I would add that I think we need to rethink how we conceive of economics and of the economy. We traditionally think of it as a process of combining capital and labor to produce output that's valued by people. Of course, that's not wrong, and it's served us well. But I think we're moving into a world where we need to think about an economy and what we do in it as the application of our intelligence and our ideas and our innovations and the use of energy to reshape matter and information into forms that are more valuable to us. And by valuable, we mean delivering well-being for people. Just to give you a few examples of that, the energy that we use to reshape the world, to move ourselves around, and the report has great recommendations in transport, but also to rearrange how we think about things, has the energy that we need is all around us. I mean, there's energy in the air around us, in the molecules around us, but yet we've been digging up black and brown and coal, oil, and gas and burning it. It's a very, very crude way of harnessing the energy that is all around us. And what's happened and what is happening now, in large measure due to China's leadership, is that we've applied our ideas to develop energy systems that are far better, far cleaner, far safer, far cheaper. In fact, some of our research released last year suggests a $12 trillion cheaper energy system, irrespective of any climate damages or the millions of people who die from pollution, by using better physics, better science to harness that energy to refashion matter and information to make life more valuable and more worth living. So this is a major step change from the past. It recognizes that when you have these major step changes, as we had in the Industrial Revolution, it is often about how we think about and we harness energy that is behind or at least associated with those step changes. And once we have cheaper, cleaner energy, it's such a key factor input to the economy that you have much greater opportunity, much greater economic surplus, consumer surplus and producer surplus and value available for everybody. In the same way that energy is all around us and we're rethinking how we harness it, carbon is all around us. You're looking at a screen, there's carbon in it. Most of your body, you know, one of the most dominant atoms, if not the most dominant atom in your body is carbon. You don't look like a lump of coal, but it's there. And just being smarter about getting the carbon in the right place. You know, not too much of it in the atmosphere, more of it in the soils, more of it back underground, is something that we're able to do now and we have to do. There's just two examples: harnessing the energy, managing the carbon. But of course, this goes well beyond these issues to biodiversity, to how we relate to one another. It's a story, a positive story of growth, also of institutional reconfiguration, innovation, ideas, investment, as the report sets out in detail, as Nick explained so beautifully, that ultimately involves quite a lot of partnerships. And I'd like to thank Jimin and Nick Stern, Juji, and the Energy Foundation and other partners for this collaboration too, because it has to be about partnership. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Cameron, for those comments. We're now going to hear from Chumping Xie of the Grantham Research Institute at LSE. Chumping, over to you.
Thanks, Bob. And thanks to Nick, Ming, and Cameron who have presented the report very well. And I just wanted to add a few points. So if we look look back on China's evolving strategies for climate change over the last decades, I think many will agree that China has actually moved from being a follower towards taking on a leading role in the global climate action, especially when the President Xi Jinping announced the carbon neutrality target, which is indeed a big step forward. And we know the importance of setting up an ambitious climate target. And we also know what more important is creating the right strategies and plans to deliver the result. And this is what our report trying to do. So in the report, we argue that the transition to carbon neutrality goes beyond just the energy sector. It requires actually a fundamental change across the whole economy, including such as changing the way in which cities and communities function and reorganizing the patterns of economic activity and behavior. And also, like Cameron has mentioned, using a more general definition of well-being instead of GDP to measure the success of development policy. So in order to foster these changes, first, it's very important to reform the organization of institutions and systems governing the economy. So in China's case, we think that the responsibility for rule setting should be led by engagement at the most senior level and implemented by institutions with oversight across departments. A good example is the formation of China's national leading small group on carbon neutrality that brings together almost all ministries. And second, we do need a full set of strategies and policies to foster investment in the right areas and spur innovation in key technologies. In the report, we argue that one guiding principle for this is the need to expand investment and innovation into all forms of capital, including physical, human, natural, and social capital. This replaced the narrow focus on physical capital that still dominate policy and is harming other forms of capital. For example, if we invest in polluting physical capital such as coal-fired power plant, and then it would damage natural capital and undermine human health, reducing the productivity of human capital. We know that there are huge opportunities linked to new clean technologies where China has taken a leading position. Today, we know that Chinese firms produce roughly 80% of the world's solar panel and 70% of lithium-ion batteries. China is also a front runner in areas such as wind turbine and electric vehicles. And a clear long-term strategy will provide a strong sense of direction and further spur for the development of these clean technologies. And the last point, I would like to echo what Ming, Nick, and Cameron has just said about the growth model and drivers of growth. We know that China, like many other countries in the world, aims to advance the climate agenda with continued and strong economic growth. So in the report, we have explained that the economic growth and the environment can actually go hand in hand through adopting a new growth strategy. We know that the old growth model that was established since the Industrial Revolution, featured by high carbon infrastructure and extensive use of fossil fuels, is not sustainable. And China needs to find new themes to serve as drivers of growth. And the transition to net zero and the tackling of adaptation and resilience and looking after our natural environment should be the new growth story for this century. So in the report, we have also offered policy suggestions on how China can implement the new growth strategy in major economic sectors, including such as energy, transport, city and land, and key action points in finance, technology, and institutions that we think are crucial to deliver on this idea. To sum up, I'm really grateful for Zhuming, who initiated this idea, and for the leadership from from including Nick, Cameron, and many others, and really glad to be part of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chumping. So we've heard from many of the authors of this report, and we're now going to have some short reactions from key people to the contents of the report. If you're in the audience and you want to, we'll be shortly coming to the panel discussion. So if you want to put a question to the panel, please put it down in the Q&A function at any time. First of all, we will ask Zhou, Professor Zhou, who's Chief Executive and President of the Energy Foundation China. Over to you for 5 minutes of comments.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, congratulations for the launch of the report. I would like to give 4 simple comments. The first one is my understanding is the paradigm change reflects the change of demand, technologies, and mindset in the new era, especially for China. Now, I mean, from the early stage of the reform and the open door policy, I mean, 40 years ago, our GDP per capita had risen from only around $200 US to today's 12,000 US dollars. So that shows the agenda and the substance of the Chinese economic development changed a lot, and people's demand also changed a lot. In the past 2 decades, we also see the cost of solar power declined over 90%. That also shows we have experienced a very rapid change of technology. The second comment is about transition. Yes, for sure, we are under transition. Let's take energy transition as an example. So we have identified at least 5 areas for the transition. So we have a slogan, say, build new city first, and phase out the old city second. So what's new? And at least we have 5 immediate areas to build up. The first one is the power source, mainly powered by renewable. The second one is energy storage. The third one is smart grid connectivity. The fourth one is powered industry and households with green power. That means we will use new power. So those power will not come from fossil fuel power, but renewable. And finally, the fifth one is to develop supply chain of technology, devices, and the equipment for carbon neutrality transition, especially combining digitalization and upgraded manufacturing in China. And these will change the whole landscape of Chinese economy and also the world economy. And my third observation is those potential might account for one-sixth of total annual capital formulation in China during the 14th five-year plan period. That means a half of investment in real estate. This shows green and low carbon investment is becoming a driver of growth rather than a barrier or resistance of growth. In short term, we need to take the opportunity of green recovery from recession or counter cyclical adjustment. China is doing that. And I think quick increase of renewable capacity and the generation, as well as electric vehicle and the battery, as Cameron mentioned just now, they are incentivized by this short-term policy. But while we celebrate those achievements, we should be aware that this is not enough. I mean, to support a medium and long-term transition towards carbon neutrality in the coming decade. That means we need medium and long-term institutional and policy to provide for incentives by policies and institutional. And we are very happy this report provides for the solution and answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Zhou. We're now going to move to Zhang Xiaoyan, who is the Vice Dean of Tsinghua University's People Bank of China School of Finance. Over to you.
Hi, Bob. Am I allowed to use the PPT?
I think so. You want to share your screen, do you?
Yes.
Yes.
Can I?
I have a go. See if you share your screen, see if you can.
Yep. Here we go. Does that work?
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Very good. Over
Great.
to you.
Well, so I have 5 minutes, so I better get going. So I want to talk about effective financial system for carbon neutrality in China. I read the report very carefully after being told me that there's going to be this opportunity to share my opinions with everybody. So here I first summarize the report. I personally think this is a groundbreaking report with far-reaching implications. Min told me many times over the last year, and I fully agree with him, the transitioning to a carbon neutral economy is a paradigm shift. I like this report because, you know, it gives the guiding principles to define the actions, outline all the support, and highlight China's role in leading and promoting global carbon neutrality. After I read this report, I started to think a little more based on my understanding of carbon neutrality. So I'm thinking for China to build an effective carbon neutral financial system, I have 3 considerations. The first one, the bottom, is how to build an efficient carbon market. You know, the current situation is in China, you know, national emissions trading scheme was already established in 2021. But as you can see from the picture on the right, trading is not always active. So what to do? I think as in the report as well, I think it's very important to have a comprehensive carbon emission database, and then with policies to allocate, you know, carbon emission. And of course, we need a market mechanism to have fair pricing for the carbon itself by using derivatives market, for instance. This is the first consideration. Now, the second consideration is how to get firms involved in those, you know, carbon neutral ventures. Well, you know, currently, we all know that these ventures would have a positive impact on emission reduction and environmental performance, but we have to face it, those projects, they are large scale, low maturity, and high risk. Where do they find the money? Mostly right now, as pointed out in the report, it's mostly coming from green loans. There's some from, you know, green bonds. But still, I'm hoping that eventually we want to encourage the use of a diverse of financial instruments, like Min mentioned to me last week. For instance, green REITs and green stocks, all those are great ideas. Now, for the third consideration, now if firms are involved in those efforts, what about the investment communities? We have to encourage them to invest in carbon neutral assets. Right now in China, institutional and individual investors, they are already starting to recognize the importance of carbon neutrality and start to invest, but still they face large challenges. there's not enough information out there. They don't have enough knowledge about what's going on there. So the actions should be, number one, we have to improve information disclosure. I know teams of people working on accounting framework to improve on information disclosure and to establish classification standards for carbon neutral investments. But of course, on the investor front, we still have to improve awareness and increase engagement. All right, to summarize what I have today, I like this report, and my understanding of building a financial system in China supporting carbon neutrality has three parts: the carbon market, the firm engaging, and the investors investing in those efforts. Of course, I should mention the reports talked a lot about international cooperation. It's quite important. I fully agree. To conclude, I believe and I agree that China will play a leading role in promoting those global governance towards carbon neutrality and shared prosperity. And that's what I have. Thank you very much. Wow, I have 41 seconds left.
Yeah, thank you very much. You caught me by surprise. Very well. Thank you very much, Zhang Xiaoyan. And thank you to all the speakers we've heard from this morning. We now have about 7 or 8 minutes for questions. At the moment, our audience seems to be a bit shy. So if you're in the audience and you have a question, please put it in the Q&A so that I can put it to the panel. But I'm going to exercise moderator's privilege and ask a question to begin with. So there's the 15th five-year plan is going to be devised over the next couple of years. So could I ask the authors if they have views on what they would like to see in the 15th plan to take forward the agenda in a way that's consistent with what the report recommends today. So I'm going to ask all of our speakers to turn on their video cameras, and if they would like to have a go at answering or commenting on that, to put their hand, just physically put their hand up so I can see. So Professor Jumin, over to you first.
Yeah, given I'm in Beijing, I guess I should give the first touch. The first issue is we're not in the 15th five-year plan yet. We'll think about that seriously, but we are think about how to we further modify, review or 14th five-year plan. In 14th five-year plans, we put a lot of efforts on carbon neutrality, but mostly on energy sectors and on how do we transform the industry into a much greener industry. We put a roughly 4.4 trillion on the 44 trillion RMB for 5-year horizons for the total investments. And a lot of big chunk of them, actually 16 trillion on the manufacturing transformation. Now, at this point, we realize the manufacturing transformation is not an easy one because it takes so many things. It takes technology, it takes renewable energy, it takes infrastructures. And more important at this stage, we need more investments in the renewable energy and in the carbon neutrality related infrastructures. And also we need to facilitate the innovations. Then the whole industry can move into the right direction, into a greener. I think that's the first issues. So now we are focused more on the renewable energy infrastructure investments. And the second important issue, as we said, we realize we need a broader understanding and scope of carbon neutrality into almost every sectors and not only focus on few. So we're in the process to review the 14th five-year plan. We'll add more. So I think in the coming few months, and the public will hear more about those issues. Meanwhile, we are thinking about the 15 five-year plans, and there will be a green dominant five-year plan.
Thank you very much, Professor Jumin. Nick Stern.
I fully agree with what Jumin has just said, where we've got 2.5 years or more of the current plan, the 14th plan to run, these issues are very urgent. So starting now, well, not starting now, I mean, intensifying now, because China has already started down that road. Intensifying now is extremely important, and Min's emphasis on the whole economy approach must be right. But looking forward to the 15th plan, that is 2026 to 2030, and that takes us to China's target of peaking by 2030. And China has often indicated that peaking could be and likely to be well before 2030. So I think one part of the story should be the quantitative side of emissions, so that China would set out in the 15th five-year plan a pathway for emissions, which would include peaking before 2030. But I would emphasize the most, above that, I would emphasize the most the importance of embracing the growth story and recognizing that the new driver of growth in China will be the transition to the low carbon economy. Just as China's always had a strategy for growth, all the way back to the reforms which Deng Xiaoping introduced in the late 1970s, early 80s of the household responsibility system, you can trace a driver of growth. I won't go through the whole story, but you can trace a driver of growth right through all that. And I would hope, and this is my main hope for the 15th plan, that it would be the drive to a low carbon economy, which would be seen as the driver of growth, not only for the 15th plan, but on towards the middle of the century. That, I think, would guide investment, would make the entrepreneurship of China still more powerful, as people can see the way the future is going with great confidence. And it would be a great model for the rest of the world.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick. Anybody else want to comment on this? Jinping? And we have 2 minutes left, so can we have very brief interventions? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Just briefly add one more point to this is I think we do need innovation and investment in these key areas and technologies, but we also need innovations in policy design as well. For example, for the energy sector, we're seeing a lot of increased investment in renewables going on in China, but I think we also need to pay attention to the management of the grid, how the grid system should be running to better integrate these renewables into the grid. That would be an important thing to think about. Thank you.
Very good, Jinping. Thank you. And Zoji, and then Jumin, very briefly, please.
Thank you. Talking about the assessment of 14th five-year plan progress, I would like to share with you some very good, very exciting news. Just to take renewable development as an example. So 2 or 3 years ago, our imagination is only about 1,200 gigawatts by 2030, but the real progress the past 2 or 3 years has shown the potential to double these targets. I mean, by 2030, that means to reach very closely reach to 2,400 gigawatts as estimated by Energy Foundation China recently, based on the real progress recently in the past years. So that's also applied to the case for electric vehicle. And that means that provides for much larger room for us to design and imagine the goal for 15th five-year plan. I would say the practice is much faster than, I mean, the policy making process and the academic research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Soji. And Jimmy, you wanted to come back on.
Because I thought two questions from audience. I think this is applied to answer the question. If I may have 60 seconds.
Yes, certainly.
It's also very relevant. The first question is relaunch CCER and what is the mean and the impact. I think that's a very important issue. Professor Zhang also the chart say the ETS system doesn't work very well so far, but it is absolutely important. Currently, the governments give quota for free, and we all encourage the government to move to a more open-based systems. I think this is the direction. But meanwhile, reopen CCER, let have a parallel market so company can trade the carbon emission quota. And so then they will sort of play a more general equilibrium role. I think this is good news. Some company can make money from that. The green the certificates. Some country can buy the quota for the emission with a low cost. So relaunching CCRE, I think is a part of introducing a more market system into this market. The second question also important. The question asked for whether the ecological civilization is more widely used to replace international carbon neutrality. I would say yes. Look like the person know Chinese language very well. We talk a lot of ecological civilization, but it's on a much broader sense. I think the process is the carbon neutrality. The drive is carbon neutrality. But at the end of the day, we want to reach the ecological civilization, which will be different from the industrial civilization, which is another milestone. I think not only for China, but also for human beings as well. But the carbon neutrality is the approach.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Jimin, and thank you for addressing the two questions that were submitted by Kaiser Saarinen. So thank you, Kaiser. I hope you were happy with those answers. We've reached the end of the event. It seems to have gone by very quickly. So thank you to all the speakers. You can download the report now in either Chinese or English from the websites of the Grantham Research Institute and the China Center for International Economic Exchanges. If you've joined this event late and you want to catch up with the start, there will be a recording of it on the Grantham Research Institute website. So you can go there and watch this again or any of those bits you missed. So thank you again to all the speakers, and I look forward to seeing you all again in the very near future to talk about how the report has influenced policy in China. So thank you all very much indeed, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, you run the seminar very well, Bob. Thanks. Thanks for everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Nick, bye-bye. Thank you.